understand if you were not able to finish this book within 1 month. This is one of those books that you should take your time to, absorb and digest because of the amount of information and facts in it, mashallah. So, yeah, so this the reason this book really resonated with me, I think, in one sentence, if I say it, is because it really fills a gap in the literature around Indian Muslims, especially as someone who has studied UPSC and has been in like secular spaces, liberal spaces, secular liberal academic spaces. Um, Even the secular, like just what Sania mentioned right now, right? Historiography, certain narrative about India's post-independent history, especially regarding Indian Muslims, right? I was very disturbed by it because it was very, it was meant in such a way as to, the reason for partition of India is, even in secular historiography, it is blamed solely on Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Muslim League Party. And the what Indian Muslims have faced, it's reduced to communalism from both sides. Like there was something called Hindu communalism and Muslim communalism. This is the narrative, right? But this narrative, it obscures many uncomfortable facts, many bitter facts about about the reality of Indian Muslims and the Indian state. And this book is very unapologetic about how it criticizes this mainstream historiography for its gaps, for its lapses in, the way it presents the story of, like the way it presents the reality of what happened to Indian Muslims during the freedom struggle, during the formation of the Indian state, and after the treatment of Indian Muslims by the Congress Party and other mainstream political parties. So it really goes into that. And the most importantly, this is one of those rare books in the existing literature which emphasizes on the agency of Indian Muslims. And if to be completely honest, the author's secular biases are sometimes very like obvious, especially in the last chapter, and I'll get into that later on. But the author's secular biases are very clear sometimes. But in spite of that, and sometimes, in my personal opinion, I do feel that at some parts he had a bit of a condescending attitude, right, towards Indian Muslims. But in spite of that, the seriousness with which he has dealt with Indian Muslim political figures, instead of just dismissing them as communalists, which mainstream textbooks, mainstream academic texts, they tend to do that, right? And that is something which you won't find here in this. On the contrary, the author, he takes Muslim political figures, Muslim political movements seriously, and places them within the broader context of Indian history. So I was really for a long time looking for literature, and I just couldn't find it anywhere. And then only in the past 2 years I began to like really come across good literature on this topic, uh, like Indian Muslims and history, like Barry Anderson's book, Paul Brass's books, GLOSCS's books, all these. So this is a good, addition to that. This alternative literature, alternative understanding, alternative narratives of Indian Muslims and post-independent Indian history. So yeah, this was just my short introduction of the book. Uh, so look, I have some certain like ideas which like in this book, and I just want to um, based on those ideas, I just want to have a discussion with you all, inshallah. See, mainly because now, as we know, elections are coming up, and now this topic is going to and it is it's a very burning topic at the moment, right? Indian Muslims and democracy, elections, etc. So, firstly, the fact, like and the fact, one of the main problems of like Indian Muslims and the participation in elections, which is dealt with in this book. So there are three main problems. First is inadequate representation of Muslims by political parties. Political parties are not ready to give tickets to Muslims anymore. And the author shows that this has always been the case. It's not like under BJP this has become a phenomenon. This has always been the case. And then secondly, names missing from electoral rolls. And thirdly, delimitation or gerrymandering, which is like rearranging constituencies in order to divide or minimize the impact of the Muslim vote. So these are the three main issues which Indian Muslims have been facing since independence itself. Uh, Only under the BJP they have become even more increased, like to the point where it has become like almost shocking that not a single, like the largest political party in the country with the largest seat share in the national parliament, and not a single Muslim legislator or not a single Muslim lawmaker. So that BJP has only quantified what a phenomenon which was already present. So so now, based on your reading of the book and elections only a few months away, what do you think? So I'm interested to know from everybody practically what is the way out of this situation. See, like we know the limitations of democracy representation. That's another debate, but like now, just for argument's sake, like what is the solution out of this? Out of this very tricky situation where how can Muslims break this impasse here, like of zero representation in politics? So, any thoughts, anyone? Yes, Taskin. This was just recently released. CSPS did a program also on it. There's this book that has come out, Muslim Secular, by Professor Amar Suhail. Very good book and very like similar topics dealt with in this book. Very, very important. And the perspective which he took is also very unique. Maybe inshallah we can read that book later on this year, inshallah. And yes, Romana, we will share the authors and books separately. Yes, anyone, any thoughts? Like Abhi, especially, opposition is like very enthusiastic, okay, about presenting itself as an alternative to BJP, right? Like they have literally called themselves India, they've called themselves the country. But they're still not, still haven't fielded any serious Muslim candidates. So like what can Muslims as voters, what can we do to show that this is not acceptable to us? Like this is like political representation has to be taken seriously by opposition political parties if they are really claiming to be alternative to BJP, right? मेरी आवाज आ रही है ना आप लोग को? कहीं ऐसा तो नहीं क्या just speaking and मेरी आवाज ही नहीं आ रही थी this whole time?
नहीं, आवाज क्लियर है.
हाँ, but okay, good. अच्छा, चैट बॉक्स में तो बोल दीजिए अगर माइक खोलना नहीं आप लोग को.
My daughter is making a lot of noise, so I'm not able to speak.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so Shiba Naz says, by being united, because where Muslims are in majority, from there many Muslim candidates come as a competitor, and completely opposite in case of Hindus. This is something different from what is being discussed, but this is also one of the problems. You witnessed it in UP. Okay. Okay, could you maybe explain this a little bit more? Because I don't think I don't think and I get what you're saying, but maybe could you explain it a little bit more? Yes, Shiva.
Assalamu alaikum
Assalamualaikum.
warahmatullahi
Welcome.
wabarakatuh.
Walaikum
Thank you
assalam
so
wa
much.
rahmatullahi.
Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. Basically, what happened? This thing is something that happened in UP, especially in the district Bishnor.
Uh-huh.
My
Okay.
like you can say my mother belongs. My
शिवा,
parents.
अब उर्दू में ही बात करें.
ओके ओके मेरे जो पेरेंट्स हैं वो यूपी से बिलोंग करते हैं और हम लोग डिस्ट्रिक्ट बिजनौर से आते हैं तो हम लोग यहाँ पे बॉर्न ब्रॉट अप हुए हैं बट हम लोग के रूट्स वहीं पर हैं तो हम लोग वहाँ पे जाते हैं ऑफ कोर्स मेरे मामू वगैरह वहाँ रहते हैं तो जो धामपुर है शायद आप लोगों ने नाम भी सुना होगा धामपुरी मिल है बहुत फेमस है वो
Mm-hmm.
बिजनौर है वहाँ पे अगर आप देखेंगे तो आपको पता होगा कि जो पॉपुलेशन मिक्स है वो कुछ इस तरीके से है कि या तो वो 50-50% है या फिर 55 मुस्लिम्स हैं 45 हिंदू हैं मतलब और कहीं कहीं पे तो मेजोरिटी जो है वो मुस्लिम्स की है बट होता क्या है इलेक्शंस के टाइम पर वहां पे लास्ट ईयर मतलब लास्ट टाइम भी यही हुआ था 2019 में कि जो मुस्लिम्स होते हैं उनके कैंडिडेट्स बहुत ज्यादा होते हैं उससे क्या होता है ना कि जो मुस्लिम्स के जो वोट्स होते हैं वो डिस्ट्रीब्यूट हो जाते हैं डिफरेंट डिफरेंट कैंडिडेट्स में
Okay.
और जो
अच्छा,
हिंदू
splitting basically. Okay.
या बाइफरकेट हो
Hmm.
जाते हैं वो और जो हिंदू होता है हिंदू कैंडिडेट वो सिर्फ एक ही खड़ा होता है so you can understand how they are like
Uh-huh.
having this is
Hmm.
they are having this a very strong strategy that if there will be just
हाँ,
one
अयवा.
candidate then definitely all Hindus vote will be going for that particular candidate only but in case of
Hmm.
Muslims,
Hmm.
fortunately, I don't know why they are not able to understand it since they are doing it for many decades. Like this is like the same kind of a
Hmm.
story. And it is repeating,
Hmm.
repeating. I don't know why Muslims are not getting their lesson. उनको क्यों ये चीज समझ में नहीं आती?
Hmm.
Clearly ये
Hmm.
चीज
Hmm.
बट ये हमेशा होता है हमेशा ही होता आ रहा है वहां पे तो मुझे लगता है ये भी काफी सारी जगह होता है एंड इफ आई एम नॉट रॉन्ग बिहार में भी यही केस हुआ मतलब टैंपरिंग तो है हम ये तो नहीं कह सकते कि हाँ वो हमेशा
Hmm.
ये हर जगह यही हो रहा है क्योंकि कहीं कहीं पर वहां पे वेस्ट यूपी में ऐसा भी है रेशियो कि 70% मुस्लिम है 30% नॉन मुस्लिम है डेस्पाइट डेट वहाँ पे नॉन मुस्लिम्स कैसे मैनेज कर जा रहे हैं वहां से निकल पाना तो टैम्परिंग तो है लेकिन एक ये वाला भी एक सॉलिड इशू है तो आई थिंक सो
Hmm.
अवेयरनेस
Hmm.
की भी कमी है यहाँ पे मुस्लिम्स जब
Yeah.
तक यूनाइटेड नहीं होंगे तो भी हम लोग इस प्रॉब्लम को फेस करते ही रहेंगे
Yep. Yes, definitely. Thank you, Shiva. This is a very Shiva. Did I say your name right?
या यू आर राइट थैंक्स
Yeah, yeah,
Prasha.
Shiva. Okay, yes, yes. This is a very, very important issue that you've brought up within Muslims during the time of elections. I remember my professor in college. He was from Aligarh. He also had said the same thing. That not apparently is a very common thing in North India. The like Muslim candidates, the three, four of them will contest, and then Muslim vote gets divided. Very, very big issue that happens. Like that gets in the way of Muslim political representation. So I think it becomes a. So I think there are few factors there, right? Possibly, one is that good old clash between political parties. Like it becomes a ego battle between political parties, right? Like they're not thinking about the constituency. They're not thinking about the constituents. They are thinking about the political party that party should come to power, and not necessarily the interests of the constituents. And then class also, like Muslims divided across castes, class, um, So yeah, that is even ideological differences also. So yeah, that becomes an issue. Um, so I think this time around, it is very important for Muslim candidates to be like very like Muslim politicians, anyone who is seeking to genuinely represent Muslim interests in parliament, and not and this is the thing that happens, right? There are many Muslim politicians who they are claiming to represent Muslim interests, but actually they are just interested in securing their own seat, right? Like apni rozi roti. Come on, and see, here's the thing: you can get your rozi roti आप जिस तरह चाहे आप ले सकते हैं, बट बस थोड़ा सा ऑनेस्ट रहिए उसके बारे में, है ना, राइट? लाइक if you are claiming to represent Muslim interests, then please represent Muslim interests. Don't mix it up with your personal ambitions. So that is a big problem that is facing. Like many Muslim politicians are there, they're claiming to represent Muslim interests, but when they get ticket from a major political party, then they start prioritizing the party's interests over the constituency's interests. And this is something across the board, actually, not limited to Indian Muslims. This clash between party politics and interests of constituencies. Yes, Romana, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum
So,
assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I think on this, recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to Prashant Kishore,
Hmm, hmm,
who
hmm.
the he was talking to a Muslim gathering, and he was being very, very clear that unless and until Muslims and more Muslims stand up, educate themselves, create more awareness, and create more Muslim representation, there's absolutely no party in all of India who will be able to help them. And he very categorically told the gathering that even me, even if I am empathetic towards your cause and I can understand the apathy over here, there is no way that anybody will be able to help you, your country, unless yourself create representations from amongst your own community.
बिल्कुल बेशक.
But the question again remains seen कि वो representation किस तरह से create हो, especially जहाँ पर now we are facing a situation where everything becomes vitriolic, कि अगर हम आवाज उठाए तो उस वही हाँ,
रोमाना, आपकी आवाज थोड़ी सी कट रही है.
So I would say it
हाँ,
is,
yes.
although the point that he was making is very valid, but how does one
Hello. हाँ.
Sorry, I got.
Yes, Romana, you finish your question. No problem. You finish what you're saying.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is that now the environment is becoming so openly vitriolic कि कोई भी हम कहाँ भी सर उठाकर खड़े होने की कोशिश करे तो वहां पे, and now we have seen all of this, वो क्या कहते हैं,
Romana, yes. I'm so sorry. We have to move ahead with the discussion due to lack of time. I'll get back to you. Inshallah. Okay. Yeah, we have to get. So just before we move ahead with book discussion, I can see Yusra's raised her hand since a long time. Yes, Yusra, yes, Yusra, go ahead, and then we'll get back to book discussion. Yes, Yusra.
I just wanted to raise an idea, like just listening to Shiba talk about the problem that she was talking about in Bijnor. It made me think about. I heard this idea on a podcast. Now I can't remember who it was who spoke about this, but it's interesting to know that in a context like that, where you have like there's a majority Muslim population and you have a couple of Muslim candidates and there's a Hindu candidate, we should also ask or like think about why are the Hindus not voting for the Muslim candidate? Now, I know some of that would be like, okay, obvious, whatever. But if we think about it, the Muslim community is constantly expected to, I mean, we are constantly voting for Hindu candidates, right? In a lot of
Yes,
like,
yes.
situations and circumstances, we're actually not sticking to Muslim candidates at all. So when we talk about
Yeah.
this whole idea of that, you have to give the test of secularism, then actually the Muslim voter is much more secular than the Hindu voter, because the Muslim voter is constantly voting for Hindu candidates, but you will see that the Hindu voter will is not voting for the Muslim candidate, and nobody's asking them that question, like, why are you not
Yes,
voting for a Muslim candidate,
yes.
right? So it just made me think about that, and I think it's interesting to think about that ideas of performances of secularism are in a lot of ways in the public sphere restricted to the Muslim body. Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Yusra. Yes, this is a very, very important point, and something for larger Indian society to reflect upon. Like, this is very true, right? Like, Muslims are always told, as soon as it's election time, like, vote strategically, don't split up the votes, vote for the opposition candidate so that BJP doesn't come to power. But then nobody, why doesn't nobody ask this of the majority community, right? Like, why don't you vote, why don't you also put your vote for Muslim candidates so that Muslims can get political representation? So this is a very, like, that's for a larger Indian society to reflect upon, like, especially majority community to think about. um as Shiva said, it is the burden on us being minority to prove secularism again and again. Yep. So, right, let's inshallah we'll have everyone pitch in, like, but we'll keep going with the book discussion side by side. So yes, Yusra, you want to say something?
No, I'm sorry. That's just
Hi Yusra,
by
boliye.
mistake. No, no, no. Please go ahead.
Acha, oh, okay, no problem. Yes. So basically, this book is divided in three parts, right? The first part is, so what the author did is, uh, Indian Muslims, he's divided into three main categories. So first is the nationalist Muslim, and when he says nationalist Muslims, he's talking about Muslims who were active in uh, the Muslims who, uh, like, the early Muslims like Maulana Azad and those early Muslims in Congress party who were, they were nationalists. So they were in the sense that they were very sympathetic to, or they were very strongly advocating for Congress party's cause, and they felt that it is in the interests of Muslims to support the Congress party for the sake of unity, communal harmony, all those things. So they believe that it's better if Muslims support the Congress party. Then, so part one, which is the first three chapters of the book, this is about those that era of Muslim politics. Then part two, communalists. Now, communalists word, the author he critically analyzes that word later on, but the point is basically any Muslim politician that went against Congress party, right, that formed their own um, party and went against Congress party. So those, or basically any Muslim politician that was very strong or vocal about Muslim causes, Muslim interests. So they were branded as communalists, as Muslim communists. So the author goes into detail about the kinds of Muslim political movements that criticized Congress Muslims, that criticized Congress party. This is part two of the book. And last part of the book, notables. So Muslim aristocracy, Muslim upper classes, Muslim upper castes, uh, how did they, uh, what was their experience with the Indian state? What was, how did, a lot of these upper caste and upper class Muslims, they had landed properties, right? The handling of Waqf property. And then the whole caste question among Muslims, like upper caste Muslims, the problems or the conflict between interests of upper caste Muslims versus Pasmanda Muslims. This is the final chapter. So this is basically the overview of the book, and so now in part one. So in part one, or in chapter one, which is identity politics, there are a few things. She has not joined us today, but she has, mashallah, sent us a very good notes compilation of the whole book, mashallah. Her name is Saima. I'll share it on the screen. And till I do that, please go ahead, and if anyone wants to discuss any further thoughts, please go ahead. By the time I share this on the screen, her voice.
I just had a question. So I haven't read the whole book, but I wanted to ask if Pratinav addresses in the book that, he's talking about Muslim agency and Muslims speaking for themselves, but he is writing this book, right? So he's putting together this sort of collating this. Does he address that in the book? If anybody wants to talk about it.
As far as I remember, I don't think he says anything about the fact that he is the one writing this book.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think he says anything about that directly.
I mean, I'll probably look up. Maybe he has talked about it somewhere. It would be interesting to know how he deals with that question.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was your question? That does he talk about Muslim agency?
No, as in, does he talk about the fact that he is talking about Muslim agency and Muslims sort of, speaking for themselves, but then he is writing this book, right?
Yeah.
As somebody
No,
who's
he
not
doesn't.
from the community. He doesn't. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we should then, it'd be nice to speak to him and ask him this question.
सही बात है कि मतलब what led
yes, definitely. He talks in the introduction that how the previous historiography has not really prioritized Muslims agency, Muslim perspective, and therefore he's writing this book. He says that, but then he doesn't examine his own position, and it becomes very obvious also in the last chapter of the book, his biases, like secular biases. Okay, so this brilliant summarization of the main points, this PowerPoint, it was shared by Saima. Saima couldn't make it today, but thank you so much to Saima, mashallah. May Allah Ta'ala reward you. This is so helpful. Even I didn't think to do this. Sorry. Because I was so busy. This is ye book club coordinator ka kaam hai, but mashallah, Saima has done it.
Yeah, it's so
for
unfortunate
me,
he
free
couldn't
of cost.
join because
Free of cost.
someone who created such good notes, it would have been wonderful had he joined.
Yes, mashallah. I actually, when I was writing book review, I did make notes, but it's all matlab itne mashallah systematically nahi tha. It's very scattered, so I can't really show it. Okay, so this is the first chapter, identity politics, and so these are some of the main demands of the nationalist Muslims or the Congress Muslims. So they had three main focus points. They focused on three main things. First was that Muslims should give full support to Congress party, and it is in their best interest to give support to Congress party, because otherwise people will say that Muslims are being communal. That was their fear. So they wanted all the Muslims to just throw in their lot with Congress party. And then the second thing, they wanted Muslims to really tone down their demands and all the consequences of this, the negative after effects of this, all of this is like the author goes into detail about all of that. So that was the second thing, that Muslims should not make too many demands, otherwise it will be like they are trying to like dominate within the party, and that will create what, like that will offend sensibilities of majority community. So that's why Muslims should tone down their demands. And then thirdly, they should concentrate energies on non-political concerns. So like preservation of Muslim personal law, uh, like non-interference in Muslim personal law, things like that, like cultural things. Like, so they did not really make political demands like uh, reservation in politics, uh, more political demands uh, like more better access, better resources for education, in education and development. So they did not really focus on these political demands. They stuck to the non-political demands. So this was the strategy of nationalist Muslims, and their rationale was, if we basically if we play it safe, then Muslims will be safe. Like they will not have to face any political blowback. Now, this strategy was a failure, as history has been proof of. At that time also it was a failure. Now also it has been proved to be a failure, right? Because and there were many parts. Okay, there are many which I've like highlighted and all. Like I was shocked. Like I was totally shocked. Like now after reading Perry Anderson's book, I knew that Congress Party was it was Islamophobic. Like there was a lot of Islamophobia within the early Congress Party, but the kinds of things that were said by people like Sardar Patel, by people like Mahatma Gandhi, like the kinds of things, like there's no other word for it other than Islamophobic. Like the kinds of things that have been said. Um, so that was like, it was very 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 interesting in that way, and very interesting to know that these kind of things you won't find in mainstream textbooks, right? In mainstream textbooks you'll have Mahatma Gandhi as this icon of communal harmony between Hindus and Muslims. Sardar Patel, this the person who united all the different provinces of India, like who made Bharat, that is Union of States, the man who made that Union of States. Like this is their narrative about them in mainstream academic text, right? But their attitude towards Muslims, their attitude towards Indian Muslim demands, it's something very shocking once you come to once you start getting to the reality of it. So this was chapter 1, and then chapter 2. In chapter 2 goes into what we already discussed, like in the beginning. Like there are certain problems of Muslims with respect to elections and voting, and these were taken up by nationalist Muslims in the beginning itself, but they could not really uh, get any proper solution for it. Like, so they dealt with all these issues, right? Separate electorates, reservations, uh, this particular method of voting, like which is different to uh, first past the post system. First past the post system, which is currently being followed, it has been criticized a lot because it doesn't really represent the majority, as opposed to proportional representation method of voting. So all these things were taken up by nationalist Muslims in this, and then yes, that there was the reason that we have Muslim personal law, and I think this was the point where despite all the mistakes of the early nationalist Muslims, one thing which today's Muslims really owe to them is that they really worked to protect Muslim personal law. Like if they had not done that, then Muslims of India would not would not have been able to follow the Sharia in our personal matters. So this is a debt which we owe to them, despite their failures, despite their mistakes. And that was a very very sad and like very poignant realization, especially for me, because there's a lot of tendency among especially young generation today to rightfully criticize and to blame the elders of the Muslim community for their pacifism, like that pacifism has got us nowhere. But they did make a lot of sacrifices, right? They did make a lot of sacrifices because of which we are, we have many things today which we wouldn't have had without their sacrifices. And yeah, then these things we've discussed, right? Like Muslim representation has always been a problem. Like this is not a recent problem by any means. And then yeah, then these are the different basically there was a depoliticization of Indian Muslims and their demands. Yes, so this is the first part of the book done. Then we get to okay, so now before we get to the second part of the book, there's one quote that I really want to discuss, and I can't find a quote and the exact page, like I had highlighted it, but basically it's the fact that in the constituent assembly, what happened was what had happened in the constituent assembly was there was a lack of unity among Muslims, Dalits, and because of that lack of unity, what happened was majoritarian demands, they became accepted. So the author says also, like, if it hadn't been for that disunity within the marginalized communities, Muslims, Dalits, OBCs, etc., then maybe there would have been separate electorates. There would have been more. There would have been more safeguards for minorities as compared to today. So, especially with elections coming up, right? What I want to know is how can we possibly work on that together, like Muslims as a community? Like what? Like so according to you all, do you think that that is something that is Muslims' responsibility to do? Like make get all like try and make that unity across all the marginalized sections of society, right? Like Dalit Muslim unity, especially during Shaheen Bagh, there was a lot of talk on that, but it never really materialized, right? The Dalit Muslim unity. So do you think that is Muslims' responsibility, or do you think like Muslims have already done whatever they need to do, and now it is the responsibility of other people to come and really build that unity? What do you all think? Was my like question clear? मेरा क्वेश्चन समझा है ना आप लोगों को? लाइक जो यूनिट मतलब इलेक्शंस के टाइम पे जो यूनिटी है, यूनिटी ऑफ द मार्जिनलाइज्ड, यूनिटी ऑफ द ऑप्रेस्ड, तो ये यूनिटी को कायम करने की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी किस पर आनी चाहिए? मुसलमानों की होनी चाहिए, या मुसलमानों ने जो कुछ कर सकते उन लोगों ने अभी कर लिया और अभी दूसरों की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी? व्हाट इज योर ओपिनियन? Okay, thank you, Taskeen. Yes. So Taskeen says it is Muslims' responsibility, especially for those who are in power. Yes, especially of those who are in power. Muslim politicians, it is the onus is on them. Okay, but so I agree with you, but also I think that because of the polarization which BJP has done, nobody is like even allying with Muslims is seen as something that is detrimental for that party. Whichever party tries to align with Muslims, it becomes like they are doing that very famous term, minority appeasement, because BJP has radicalized people's minds, right? So they are not able to look at Muslims in a neutral manner at all. Like any political party that tries to ally with Muslims even a little bit, it is seen as they are doing minority appeasement. So what can be done to break that image? Or so like don't you like do isn't it like now it a responsibility of Dalit Bahujan parties, Dalit Bahujan leaders to be more proactive in their support for Muslims?
जी अंजला बोलिए.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum. So this is not a direct answer to what you've asked, Virasha. So there are two things that come up in my mind after listening to what you've said. First thing is that I personally believe that it is not merely Muslim responsibility or the marginalized section responsibility. The responsibility is where the awareness comes from. So if discussions
Hmm.
like these, I'm not aware about discussions that take place in other communities, but if discussions like these take place in our communities, and we have this sort of awareness that there should be a sort of horizontal solidarity between marginalized groups to overthrow those in power, then
Hmm. Hmm.
the efforts can be taken on the side on the part of Muslims, especially like someone said on the part of people who are in power. Secondly,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
also at the same time believe that I do not see this unfolding irrespective of efforts and irrespective of awareness drives,
Hmm.
discussions, etc. I do not see it happening, at least in the immediate future, because I
Yeah.
recollect something that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has said about what Suraj
Hmm.
Yingre has said, that first of all,
Hmm.
this entire Hindu community is a misnomer. They do not exist as a community. It is just, a sort of labeling or manufacturing of identity. Okay,
Hmm.
पहली
Hmm.
बात तो it's
Hmm.
just a collection of castes. And
Yeah.
when things like this happen, when the marginalized sections from their community, as we talk about it, if they are aware that they are oppressed by their own people, what do people in power from their community do? They label the identity
Hmm.
कि ठीक है, you belong to the lower fringes of the caste order, but you are still a Hindu, so you're still one among us. But they are the other
Hmm.
because they are Muslims altogether. They're different. So when I think that efforts are taken to unite the people from their sections of the community who are marginalized, like we are in the context of a nation, then this sort of
Hmm.
what do we say? This sort of um, manufacturing of identity takes place, because of which it does not really happen. So the
Hmm.
practicality
Hmm.
of whether we can be united is something which can be interrogated, according to me.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Anzala, for chiming in. Yes, this is a thing, right? And the challenge is how to like communicate this to majority of people, like how to make them come to this understanding. Yes, anyone else? Okay, y'all can see the screen, right? The slide. Okay, so that was part one of the book, and yeah,
The
this
slide is
thing,
not
right? That actually slide is not visible. Uh, Once again. Okay, how about now? Okay. Yes. So now this is part 1 of the book done. Now part 2 of the book. Here we see how certain Muslim politicians and certain Muslim political figures, they started their own political movements to really counter the Congress. So the Muslim parties. And so there was this phenomenon called green scare, which will be familiar to you if you know about red scare, right? Red scare in the West was this thing where Western politicians started spreading this conspiracy theory that like communism is spreading in the West, right? During the Cold War between US and USSR. So US and Europe, they really started spreading this conspiracy theory in their like in their countries that communism is taking hold of this country, and therefore you should support nationalist parties, because if you don't, then communism will take over this country and make it just like make the US just like Soviet Union. So a similar phenomenon happened where uh, there was this idea that like, which is another version of minority appeasement, which is like Muslims, which is like political parties are favoring Muslims' demands, right? Like Muslims are doing domination basically. But what happened was what Muslim politicians did was they smartly utilized that to get affirmative action for Muslims. And then that whole history after Nehru's death and until until Indira Gandhi's time. So all the ups and downs, right? The way there was, Muslim pogroms and the reality of Muslim pogroms, anti-Muslim riots, the very definition of the word riot. All these things the author goes into detail. And most importantly, okay, so Sam has only done the first chapter, first 2 chapters. So basically, once again, I'll stop screen sharing. Yeah. So basically, this so one important point from second chapter is that what is the real reason that riots happen? And the author gives us all different, arguments about which have been provided till now by different academics. Why do riots happen in the Indian context? And then the author gets to the heart of the matter that once again I'll just find that page quickly. Till I find that. In the meantime, yes, I found it. Right. See, so there are many different explanations, right? Like why riots happen, but the real answer is basically that, like according to the author, and which I thought was like very relevant even to today's situation, right? Like we are seeing this thing happening again and again. Last year, Ram Navami celebrations, what happens, and then the demolitions, what is happening in this demolitions, most recently in Haldwani, right? So what is happening is so the author writes, communal violence in UC is the product of electoral competition. As such, riots are best viewed as little more than danses macabres, which is a French term for, basically the translation would be tamasha, meant to woo the marginal seat swing voter. Accordingly, in states with close contests, a de facto two-party system, the incentive to stoke riots is greater, because in such environments, first past the post, as ever, the handmaiden of majoritarianism, there is a strong premium on creating a consolidated Hindu constituency. So this, of course, requires flattening other cleavages, other differences, other challenges. So it is here that stigmatization of Muslim comes to the fore. The unpopular minority par excellence, the com, makes for the perfect other. This is a truth politicians know only too well. Interfaith violence goes a long way in turning attention away from intercaste tensions. So this is and this is a very popular theory now, which has been explained even by Christoph Jaffeler also. Like, basically what is happening is, the reason riots and all are manufactured is to consolidate Hindus against a common other. Because if they don't do this, then what will happen is, the intercaste tensions will become, which even in spite of within the Hindu nationalist movement, intercaste tensions are becoming even more and more stark day by day. So if Hindu nationalist movement does not do this stigmatization of Muslims, the persecution of Muslims, so basically Hindu nationalists will not have any they don't have anything to offer other than this, right? Like, this is the point of the riots, to gain to maintain electoral power, to maintain political power of the majority community. So this, I thought, is a lot, it can be of course argued that this is not the only explanation, like there are also other explanations, but in context of elections, if we are talking in context of elections, this is a very important argument. So before we head to the concluding part of the book and talk about that, any thoughts, ideas by anyone who's read the book, or read this part of the book? Yes, guys, anyone?
Rasha, I'm just interested in
if you don't want to.
I'm interested in knowing about the last part, Ashraf betrayal.
Yes. Okay.
Can you talk about that?
Okay. Yes. Okay. Let's. So you want to say anything about that first?
नहीं, मैंने किताब में वो पढ़ा मतलब इंट्रोडक्शन में कि फाइनली ही डील्स विद इट, बट मेरे लिए एक सस्पेंस वाला एलिमेंट है बिकॉज आई डोंट नो कि उन्होंने उस बारे में क्या लिखा है.
Okay, yes. Okay, so let's get to the final part of the book. So part 3 of the book is Muslim Notables. Chapter 7 is Class Acts. So in this chapter, the author talks a little bit about history of AMU, like the issues surrounding waqf properties, and Muslim elites, how they handled the waqf properties. So that, and then the final chapter, Ashraf betrayal, conclusion, Ashraf betrayal. So yes, so this is the part of the book where I had the most disagreements with the author. Like, till now, majorly I agreed with the author's arguments, viewpoints. In fact, I thought they were very important arguments. Here I felt, here also in this, concluding chapter, he makes important points, but some points I have respectfully, I would disagree with them. So yes, so one example of that I'll give you all. So he writes, very simply, Hindus and Muslims have long been communities apart. Both, moreover, are totalizing faiths. One need only think of the caste system and the Sharia. So this part, okay, I think it's a little bit problematic uh, because he is basically, what he's saying is both moreover are totalizing faiths. So like he's basically saying that Hinduism and Islam are totalizing, but that's the whole problem, right? Like Hinduism is not a religion. Like that's a whole, and now if we start talking on that, it will take a whole other program. And I have a book recommendation for you all on that. I'll put the book recommendation in the chat box. It basically the Brahminical inscribed in the body politic by G. Aloysius. So if you read that book, you'll understand why this statement is problematic. Hinduism is not a religion. Okay, it's a collection, and Baba Sahib Ambedkar already explained it. It's a collection of castes. There's no such thing as Hindu religion. There's Brahmanism, and then there are a variety of other different faiths, different cults. Now, cult is a very negative word, but cult, its original meaning of cult, which means religious following or religious thing, in that sense, cult, not the negative cult. But Hinduism is, it's basically a collection of cults. It's not a codified religion at all. Islam, you can argue that it's a totalizing codified religion, but basically in that sense, you cannot really compare Hinduism and Islam in that sense. So first thing. Second thing, he says one need only think of the caste system and Sharia. So he's basically making an equivalence between caste system and Sharia, which again, as you can, with anyone with a basic understanding of sociology, can say that that's not a acceptable comparison at all, because they're, for the simple reason that those are completely different things, right? Caste system it's a method of organization of society. Sharia is civil law. It's a law, and caste is not law. Caste is a system of organization of society, hierarchical, violent, marginalizing, like what all those things about caste system. It's fine, but technically, what it is, it's a hierarchization of society. And Sharia is completely different. Sharia has to do with law, personal law, civil law, criminal law, things like that. So, and once again, not all Muslims follow Sharia, and that is so true in South Asia. All of us know the reality. Not all Muslims follow Sharia the way it is supposed to be followed, but all Hindus, all Indians, inadvertently, one way or another, everyone falls under caste system. So, like, how can you equate both of them? So this is like a very common tendency among secular liberal academics, where they will try to draw this false equivalence between Hindus and Muslims. And the reason this part I really found it problematic is in the previous pages, right? This whole part of the book, the author has criticized, but just that aspect the author is criticized, right? Like that there was no such thing as Muslim communalism. It was the Islamophobia of the Indian state. And then book ke end mein aane ke baad author makes this exact kind of argument which he has been criticizing all this time, like this false equivalence, this both sides thing. So this I found very strange, like for the author to make this kind of argument. And then particularly related to Ashrafism, also he makes a few very problematic arguments. So he says, he says so he talks about how madrasas, idgas, imamaras, fatwas, Quranic learning, all these things he mentions. And he says, as a result, the very idea of Islam became Ashrafized, paralleling the Sanskritization of Hinduism. So again, this is like it's a very basic, like this is like the criticism we are making here is not an ideological criticism at all. It's a very basic academic criticism. These things about Islam, right? Quran, namaz, madrasa, they're common to all Muslims. Intercaste problems hote hai, wo alag baat hai, but these are common to all Muslims. Like any Muslim, regardless of his or her caste, will pray namaz, will read Quran, will go to the masjid, will go to Eidgah, will go to a madrasa, right? Like these are not like specific to one caste within Islam. These are common to all Muslims. Whether it is followed or not, that's another story, right? But so like, and the author is equating that with Sanskritization of Hinduism. So like it's like a very academically unacceptable argument or thing to say. Okay, one valid point in my opinion regarding Ashrafism which author makes is so the author gives the example of you know how during Shaheen Bagh there was this very classic joke or very like classic thing that was being said that that was being said about the prime minister that prime minister go back to your chai ki dukan, right? So and the prime minister doesn't have his degree certificate or something like that, like he himself doesn't have his documents, so how can he like you know how can he say like be in favor of a law which asks people to produce their documents. So here the author says that you know this is a very internalized casteist mindset where we think that someone who is running a chai ki dukan or someone who doesn't have a degree certificate is not qualified to make laws. Or so I don't so I won't say I agree or disagree with that, but I think it's a valid point. It's an interesting thing to discuss. So yeah, this is about the yeah. So basically, in this chapter, is the author tries to discuss the phenomenon of Ashrafism. So he makes some valid points, but majorly this chapter, most of his arguments are like academically they are not very acceptable. So that is my personal opinion on the final chapter. So yes, this was the book. If any of you have not read it, I'll highly recommend take your time with it, read it aram se within 2-3 months. And there are many. The good part of this book, the good thing about this book is, in the end, you have a nice long bibliography of books and authors related to this topic. So if you are someone who wants to increase your knowledge about Indian Muslims and democracy history, so this is a very good starting point for that. So yeah, those are my thoughts.